What's up, folks? We're back. How's it going? How are we doing today? We are on the way to a second episode of Coming Back, starting this in a podcast format. Last time was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I had some good audience here. Got a haircut here, as you can see. Survived an earthquake, and now it's raining like cats and dogs outside. Very rare. We've got a tropical storm that is making landfall in Southern California, and at the same time, we had a 5.1 magnitude earthquake about 18 miles from where I live. So that was fun. It was a fun day. But we are here. We are live. If the power goes out, thanks for coming by. So we had some pretty big news today on the Ukraine front. Zelensky today, this morning, went to Denmark today and the Netherlands, I think, both either yesterday or today. We went to both places, and they have finally committed to supplying F-16s to Ukraine. If nobody remembers, about let's see here. About July 17th, 2014. So coming up on, about 9 years ago, Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down by Russians, pretty much, over Ukraine, with it's called a Buk 9M38. It was about 50 kilometers past the Ukraine border, and it was shot at by missiles, and it was downed. 283 passengers and 15 crewmen were killed in there, and by far the largest group of people killed on that air flight were from the Netherlands. So the Dutch have been itching for payback for a very long time. So this is the way for them to do it. The Dutch have said that they will supply 42, I think, F-16s. That's what they're saying they're going to do. Somebody said today total between the Dutch and the Danes, it's going to be about 61. I would take that number kind of with a grain of salt. I'm not sure if that's going to be the total number. A lot of these countries have kind of moved past the F-16 and moved more towards buying maybe the Eurofighter or the Rafale or the Gripen or the F-35 from the U.S. But Ukraine is going to be getting, finally, fighter jets. Now, the traditional training time for F-16s is usually about 9 months. They've started training, I think, last week. I saw it online. There was a Ukrainian pilot who's training, saying that for the last week they've been getting English lessons along with current lessons on avionics. They're training pilots, maintenance personnel, and technicians. So, they need to know how to fly it, but they also need to know how to maintain it. And usually, when you're flying those jets, usually for those airframes, for every hour you're in the air, you have to provide like 12 hours of maintenance hours at least, just to make sure it's airworthy again. So you need all the technicians and engineers you can to make sure that it's running properly. So that was the big news coming out of Ukraine today. One of the bigger news is that we're starting to hear kind of rumors of is that Russia has withdrawn from Robotyne, Robotyne. This has kind of been a major axis of attack for the current counteroffensive from Ukraine. It's kind of been a tough nut for them to crack. I think that it's right right on their first main line of defense, the Surovikin line. So they've had to they've kind of had to push through kilometers worth of minefields and trenches just to be able to get to the town itself. They had surrounded it on three sides, and they had put the main supply route into and out of the city under artillery fire. At the moment, Ukraine is actually kind of having a surplus of artillery over Russia, mainly because of the DPICMs, the dual purpose cluster munitions that artillery can fire. So they've kind of really kept the Russians from resupplying, staying steady and everything. I'm going to bring something up here. Oh, let's see here. Okay, so we're going to do this. Where are we at here? Novakovka. Sorry guys, I'm just looking for something real quick. Alright, so I'm going to share this for you guys here real quick. Let's bring this up and go here. Alright, so we got, this is a from the International Study of War. This is the war, basically the war map that they put together for Ukraine. They are in this area right here. You can see all of these right here, these little triangles. They're the fortifications that Russia's built. So this blue right here is the counteroffensive, the territory that they've reclaimed. This is one of the main axis of advances right here in Robotyne. And like I said, channels are starting to say online and that Ukraine has taken the city. They're past the city center, and that Russian units are actually retreating and falling back from the city onto the second line of defense. That would mean that pretty much they have gotten through the first line of defense, which is probably the hardest to get through. It's been a slog. This counteroffensive in earnest started about in June of 2023. So they've been going at this for about 2 months now. They spent a lot of time. The West wasted a lot of time wanting to train and dragging their feet on supplying equipment. And so that's been a big thing right here. And so all that time wasted, basically Russia spent that time wasted building these fortifications. They built 3 main lines. Basically, the Russian defensive doctrine is what's called defense in depth. So they're just they built all these defenses around. They had a main line right here. That's meant to soften up the enemy, right? They're supposed to push through that and soften up the enemy. They're supposed to be like kilometers and kilometers of mines. So Russia spent the better part of 8 months building these fortifications. The only problem is Russia really doesn't have the manpower to properly run these things, to man them properly. They're moving troops laterally. They're moving troops like this way. They're moving troops to weak points in this area right here, but they're not moving them from down here to up because they don't have the troops to do that. It means they're running out of troops. They don't have enough to actually properly man the lines. Most of the troops here are mobilized, so they're probably not fighting in the best of circumstances. But it's been a slog for Ukraine too. All of this, I think it's Oh, I'd like to say maybe it says it here. No, that doesn't. But they've taken about, I think, 100 square kilometers back in total, because they're fighting everywhere. You know, they're pushing everywhere. Their goal is to try to, basically, their goal is to try to find the weak spots. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find what the weakest spot is, and when a spot opens up, they're gonna push into that spot. A lot of what we're hearing in mainstream media right now is kind of bullshit. They're talking about how this is a failed counteroffensive, not taking into account the fact that they've almost breached the first line. They're pushing through it. It's taken a long time because the Ukrainians don't have the air support to properly run this thing like they've been trained to do. Because when NATO and the U.S. trained them, they trained them in what's called combined arms warfare. Combined arms warfare is basically infantry, armor, artillery, and aircraft all working together simultaneously with perfect timing to breach proper defense lines. Okay, and they didn't get the aircraft to give them the close air support, and the fact that they probably couldn't use that stuff anyway because of how saturated air defenses are on both sides in this event, in this thing. Helicopters will fly nap of the earth. Nap of the earth is when you're 20 or 30, maybe 50 feet above ground. There are a lot of videos online of Ukrainian helicopters flying just over like highways and stuff. And because there's so many air defenses and so many man portable air defenses like Stingers, Iglas, stuff like that. Nobody wants to fly. Nobody who's smart, at least as a pilot, is going to fly high enough for them to get locked on and shot down. And so you don't have very much air support. There was a story about 3 weeks ago stating that Ukraine actually kind of gave up on using combined arms warfare and went back to the types of assaults that they were used to, that had been working from them throughout this war. And we saw a noticeable uptick of advance when that happened. We also saw a very noticeable uptick of advance when Ukraine was given cluster munitions by the U.S. as well. Cluster munitions, basically, it's an artillery or a rocket shell that you shoot from tube or rocket launcher, multiple rocket launchers. You shoot it up, it flies into the air, and as it reaches its top point, comes back down. It's guided to where it's going to go, and as it gets to a certain level, the rocket pops open, and a lot of sub munitions fly out, and it just saturates an area with individual little explosions, and it's really good at clearing trenches. The controversy for it is that there's a lot of unexploded submunitions, and so a lot of people were talking about how it would be a danger to civilians. I mean, newsflash, Russia's been using cluster munitions for the entire war, and Russian cluster munitions have an unexploded ordnance rate anywhere between 20 to 30%, which means 20 to 30% of the submunitions that fall out of the shell that's fired by the Russians don't explode when they hit the ground. Western cluster munitions from the countries that still have them have maybe a 2 to 3% unexploded ordnance rate. Very good. So it's kind of it's like, I don't really care about what you think about that. This is war, you gotta handle that. You gotta do what you need to do to advance, and it's been helping them a lot. But they're still missing the air support. The West, the U.S., everybody, they've been dragging their feet on this. There was a story yesterday. President Zelensky went to Sweden, which isn't a NATO member yet, by the way, guys. They're still waiting for Turkey and Hungary to vote them in. Sweden actually said that they are in the process of testing out Ukrainian pilots to see if they can use their Gripen multi-role fighters. The JAS-39 Gripen, I think, is what it is. It's a multi-role fighter. It's a Delta Wing twin engine, and it is designed and produced domestically in Sweden. There's about 300 of them, I think, have been built, and they were talking about giving a squadron of them to Ukraine, which would be a big black eye to the U.S. and to NATO because of how much they've dragged their feet to provide multi-role fighters like the F-16 or like the Eurofighter or the Rafale. I think the minister or the chief of the Air Force for Ukraine was talking about if he had a list of aircraft that he would want, it would be F-16's first, Gripen's second, Rafale's third, and I think Eurofighter's fourth. So, they're needing these aircraft, and it's not that they need the aircraft for dogfights or air-to-air combat. They need it because of the missiles and the munitions that the Western aircraft can carry. They're much more advanced. They're much more accurate than Russian munitions. A lot of what Russia's doing is they'll send a dumb bomb, 500 kilogram explosive bomb, and put a glide kit on it and release it from a far distance away and glide it towards a target. It's called a Fab 500 is what they call it. And it's a massive bomb. It blows up. You see a mushroom cloud. But the Ukrainians don't have as many of those, and they don't have the ability to use them the way that they're supposed to be used, as effectively as they're supposed to be used. And so Western aircraft would let them do that. Western aircraft would let them train on what's called wild weasel missions. Basically, you load up on HARMs, anti-radiation missiles. The U.S. makes great HARM missiles. And what you do is you're searching for anti-aircraft defense radar systems, which is basically the heart of an air defense network and if you destroy the air defense radar, you can't guide the missiles to a target. So the missiles kind of become useless until you get that radar fixed or replaced. And that's something that Western aircraft like the F-16 would let them do. It's a very dangerous mission. I doubt that Ukraine would be able to effectively do it in any amount of time, but it's something that would certainly allow them to knock back Russian air defenses. And another thing why they want to do it is those help with intercepting cruise missiles coming from Russia. Okay, one of the biggest things that Ukraine has to contend with is Russia launching cruise missiles from outside their borders and hitting civilian and military targets. Most of what Russia aims for and hits are civilian targets. Yesterday there was an attack on a museum, I think. Missiles hit a museum and killed 6 civilians and injured 18 of them, and one of those killed was a 6-year-old girl. She's been on, they put her online everywhere. So, and a side note for that, to see how demented people in Russia are, or how cold and uncaring they are. Somebody on Telegram put a picture of her headstone and said, free pair of shoes, never used. And it got 63,000 likes on that website. And I'm like, and you sit there and look at that and you just see how callous those people are. and how much those people just don't care about other people at all. And it kind of sickens my stomach to hear that and to see that. But that's what we're dealing with, you know. And so taking this town right here, Rabatan, if it's actually taken, kind of opens up a little bit of an avenue here for the second line of defense. But one of the things that really kind of irks me in regards to like the New York Post and the Washington Post and the New York Times, got those mixed up together, is they're talking that the reason this is a failed counteroffensive is they're saying that Ukraine needs to get to Melitopol. Okay, I want you to look at this map. So the entire goal of this counteroffensive is they want to cut off the land bridge between Crimea and Russia right here. Okay, when Russia invaded, their entire goal, they came from the south here, they came from the east here. One of their major goals was to create what was called a land bridge. Okay. And that land bridge is what allowed them to transport goods and material and not rely on this bridge right here, the Kerch Bridge, a bridge that's been attacked 2 times and damaged extensively 2 times. Okay? The goal of the Ukrainian counteroffensive is to cut this land bridge right here. So basically they need to cut the E58 right here. And this area right here. This is Sorry about that, guys. I got a warning on my phone. We got a flash flood warning in Southern California in this area. So we're staying indoors, we're not going anywhere. But anyway, so basically what the purpose of this counteroffensive right here is to cut off the land bridge, right? They need to cut off this road right here, the E58. Okay? Now, look at this map. Somebody tell me why Melitopol is the place where you think that they need to get to. They don't need to get to Melitopol, okay? Yes, this is a very big concentration of Russian forces and fortifications because there was no ability like the Kharkiv offensive last September. There was no availability of tactical surprise. They just couldn't do it. It was obvious where Ukraine wanted to go and where they were going to go. Okay? Now, you see this right here? You see all these defensive works, okay? Russia has basically made Tokmak a fortress around there, right? You've got minefields, you've got dragon's teeth, everything, right? And, you know, Russia's like, oh, we want you to come and try to take Tokmak. The Ukrainians don't need to take Tokmak, right? If they break through here, if they come down and take Robotne, right, which they have, then they turn east and take Verbov, which they're also coming from this area, right? They're coming from 2 different areas here. So they come in here, they take this, right? And they come on to Verbov. They take Verbov. They've basically gotten to the last stretch of defense. If they make it through this line of defense, look at all this open ground here, guys. Everything right here. They just go straight down. They hit the N30. They cut it. They cut it off from Tokmak. They come in here, right here. They have open ground. Okay? That's what they're trying to do. They have open ground right here. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not even saying they're going to be able to do it. But what I'm saying is the New York Times and the Washington Post are high on something if they think that Ukraine has to go through all of these defenses to hit Melitopol and cut off the land bridge, because this does not really cut off the land bridge. It doesn't. It doesn't do what they need to do. It's much easier for them to go this way, go down here, hit the N30 if they can right here, and go and surround Berdyansk. they cut off the E58 right here, and then they cut it off here, and on both ways, this entire area becomes untenable for them. They can't hold this. There is one area right here in Crimea to get into there, to get into Ukraine. And don't forget, guys, this bridge right now is down. You can't really drive through it. It's very hard for them to drive through it. So you're not taking military supplies here. The Ukrainians have created and perfected an unmanned sea vessel called the Sea Buddy or Sea Bunny, and they're using it constantly to try to figure out the defenses here. They also have Storm Shadow. They have Scalp extended cruise missiles. So France, Great Britain, and Germany is about to do it as well, but they're being given long-range cruise missiles, and they've adapted their Su-24s, an old Soviet aircraft, to carry and fire those cruise missiles. So when I sit here and I read a New York Times article saying, oh well, hey, they're not going to be able to take Melitopol. They don't need to take Melitopol. It's a useless town to take, because they just have to go this way. They have to cut it this way. If they cut it, everything west becomes untenable, and the Russians have to start thinking about falling back. And let's not forget, right here, Ukraine is starting to move over to the other side of the Dnipro, right here. They've basically taken all the islands here, almost, and they are right here. They've got troops in this area right here, right where the Antonovsky Bridge used to be, right here on the E58 in this way. This used to be a bridge. It was blown up when the Ukrainians retreated from the southern area, the Kherson, or from actually when the Russians backed off, they blew the bridge. But Ukraine landed troops here, and they're kind of, I don't know what they're doing. It's very, very radio dark for those guys. But every now and then we'll see videos and get reports. There are troops moving around here that are Ukrainian. They're just kind of messing around here. They're moving. They're active. We don't know how many they have. We don't know what they have. But, Ukraine has artillery that's hitting Russian positions here. And who knows if they take Oleshki, that opens up another avenue of attack. So, I mean, Ukraine, even though they're fighting very hard and they're losing troops, their biggest battle, Ukraine's biggest battle right now is time. When the muddy season starts, it's going to be about time where they have to kind of slow down their offensive. They can't really go anywhere. That's going to be when it's going to be felt the hardest that the West didn't provide them with fighter jets, because they could have made a massive difference. It might not have been the decisive difference, but it could have been a massive difference in regards to getting through some of these Russian positions, because they would have had more accuracy and a better ability to get through what they're doing faster. There are reports that basically all of what Ukraine has is being committed, but we don't know that yet. We're not really seeing if the entire units are being committed or if just part of the units are. So all right, so all right, I lost my train of thought there for a second, guys. So, and also in regards to the F-16s, the Netherlands, I believe, stated that they'll send the first 4 by the end of the year. So it leads me to believe that Ukraine's had some sort of training on these F-16s. If a country believes that they'll be able to send 4 of their jets by the end of this year. That's only 4 months away, guys. This year ends in 4 months. Can you believe that? That is so crazy. It's been a long year, but it's gone by really fast. Oh, and next year's going to be rough because we're coming up on election season, guys, and the online world is going to be crazy. So, man, content for days. I'm gonna have content for days, but man, at some point it's gonna be whoo, baby. So, you know, that's all I can really think of today in Ukraine. It's kind of been a slow news day in Ukraine, other than the F-16s this morning, and other than the rumors of them taking Robotin. But if it's true that they've taken Robotin, then that's bad news because there's Russian telegrams. So, all right. So when the Ukrainians gain full control of Robotin, then they can they can choose to push south or to push east. I would guess they're going to push a little bit east because it's probably a little bit easier for them to get through it if they go east. It allows them a little bit more leeway to get around some defenses, and they're changing up tactics a little bit to make sure that they can see the mines with their drones at night. Since the U.S. and the West didn't really supply them with all the mine clearing vehicles that they requested, they got a chunk of them, but they didn't get all of them. They didn't get really as many Mikleks as they need. So what the Ukrainians have started to do is they'll wait till night, and they'll send a drone over the battlefield, and they'll turn on the thermal camera, and they'll be able to see where the mines are. So they'll send their sappers out to find the mines and disarm them. You got to remember, guys, it's not just anti-tank mines. These are anti-personnel mines. It's probably a very big mix of mines. Some of them probably don't show up on metal detectors. And they have these probably one of the most evil things invented is a little pedal mine. I'm going to show you what this is. It's right here. Right here. This is a pedal mine. It's an PFM1 mine. And Russia uses these very extensively. These things are probably maybe 1 or 2 pounds, very light. You fire them from an artillery. They're in an artillery canister. They pop open, and they're called pedal mines because they kind of float down onto the ground. These don't take any pressure at all to set off, right? If you pick this up after it's activated, it'll set off, right? And you can't really see it very well, and you can't really defuse them. You have to shoot them to blow them up. And these right here is what is the largest danger to civilians, because these are probably scattered all around Ukraine, especially in cities where Russians were falling back in September, where there are still civilians and people moved back in afterwards. So that's, these are probably the biggest threat to the civilians, because that'll take an arm off, that'll take a leg off, that could kill you. A little kid walks over that, yeah, that's goodbye. So, these are the things that Ukrainian sappers have to deal with in the field. Probably something that I would never want to do. Explosive ordnance detail, no thank you. I'd be scared shitless all the time on that. But that's what they have to clear to be able to clear a lane to get through these defenses of Russia. And this is 8 months worth of defenses. Okay, so it's tough sledding for Ukraine. They've lost. The New York Times came out with that article the other day saying that they lost about 500,000 casualties between Russia and Ukraine. Russia taking the bigger brunt of that, but still tough sledding over there without proper support. I do want to show you guys. I do want to show you this. Yesterday I mentioned it, but Ukraine launched a drone strike on one of Russia's strategic bomber airfields, which is near St. Petersburg, which is almost 500 or 600 kilometers from the border of Ukraine. Ukraine is probably, after this war, going to become a test ground for a lot of drones. If Western nations are not taking the proper lessons from drone warfare that's been happening in the Ukrainian war, then they are asleep at the wheel. Okay? The Ukrainians created a drone that had enough stamina to go 600 kilometers and attack a Russian strategic bomber base. Now, the Russians were like, oh, well, one or two of our bombers were damaged. Now, when the Russian Ministry of Defense puts out something like that within an hour of something happening, it's a good bet that there's a lot more damage than that. And these are pictures that just came out today of that base. It says here, 650 kilometers. That's a Tu-22M3. The United States designation for that is, I believe, a Blackjack, but it is a strategic bomber. It goes in the air. It can carry 2, 3, 4 cruise missiles. That thing is not going to fly anymore, ever again, guys. That is a total loss. And we're only seeing a picture of one of them. Okay, and this base also had missiles that were kind of left in the open, like out in the open. You saw them; they were sitting there. The missiles that they normally have, I think they were the XM-22s. Their original intention were anti-ship missiles, I believe, but they were converted to ballistic cruise missiles. And they're kind of old. They're older, and they're fueled when they're put onto the planes, because the propellant that they use is very volatile, and if it's left out and it explodes, everything's going. But they saw, I think, quite a few smoke plumes at this base, so we've only seen the picture of one of them. But if you look at this and you see that Ukraine was able to send something 650 kilometers away from its border and accurately destroy a Russian strategic bomber, the same distance to the southeast is another Russian strategic bomber base that houses Tu-25 backfires. They should be doing that as well. The reason why Ukraine, in my opinion, is really cornering the market in drone warfare is because they have to think outside the box. They have to think unconventionally, because they are the smaller dog in this fight. They have less population. They have less people. Um, dang. They have, they have less people per capita. So Russia has a lot more people to draw from, and because of that, they have a lot of more people that buy into what's going on. Okay, and so you're getting a lot of troops, or you're getting a lot of civilians being willing to be conscripted into the Russian military. And before this war started, there was actually a law in Russia that stated that conscripts couldn't go to war. Basically, they couldn't be deployed. Only contract soldiers got deployed elsewhere. Basically, what it is, I think Russia really doesn't have a traditional military. Sunburnt, thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Russia doesn't really have a traditional military. They conscript, and their soldiers, I think, serve. Let me double check it. I think they serve only 12 months. Yeah. Okay. So, Russia does a conscription. They conscript between 18 to 30-year-olds, and they do it in a 12-month cycle. Now, here's the problem with that, right? Compared to nations like the U.S. and Europe, who have professional armies, right? They have smaller but professional armies. Here's the problem. Russia can boast that on paper they have a 1,000,000-man army, but it's constantly moving forward. They don't have a professional NCO, or non-commissioned officer corps, group of people that train soldiers. They'll train their soldiers for 3 months. Okay. And at the end of those 3 months, they'll find a few people that they think either want to be there for long term, or they want to, or they're smart enough or whatever to become sergeants, and they'll send them to like advanced training. And that's another like 3 or 4 months. By the time that sergeant is done with training, over half of his enlistment is done. Right? It used to be 2 years for the Soviet Union, but when Vladimir Putin came into office, he lowered it to 1 year. So it actually made things worse. It hasn't gotten rid of the corruption, and it hasn't gotten rid of the violent hazing that is in Russia. And so these people are being sent with really, really bad training. They're not being sent with enough equipment to actually fight, and they're not being given the weapons and the proper incentives to do it. So they're not signing contracts to stay longer, right? So you're losing the effectiveness of this army. This army wasn't effective to begin with. It's lost almost 300,000 in casualties in a war that seems to be that Russia can't actually win. Russia seems to be in the position of they just don't want to lose this now, right? And Ukraine has actually turned into one of the stronger militaries in Europe, with one of the most professional armies and some of the most experience that we'll probably see in our lifetime. And they're doing it in the middle of a war. So they've spent the last 500 plus days transforming their military into probably one of the most lethal armed forces in Europe, against a 1,000,000-man army, against a leader that wants to kind of walk a tightrope between winning and not committing all his troops. And so you also see that the reason that they're so ineffective as a military force is of the corruption and the competition. Russia has sent multiple private military companies into Ukraine. There was a story I read. There's a town called Volodar. It's kind of a pretty important center town in southeastern Ukraine. But Ukraine was able to kind of solidify their positions there, and one of the main reasons that they were able to do that is over the course of the battle for Bakhmut, there was also a battle for Volodar, and what happened would be that there'd be private military corporations rotating in and replacing Russian units, and they'd constantly rotate in and out. The thing is, they wouldn't communicate with each other. They wouldn't talk about the tactics they had been using because there was so much competition between them that they didn't want to help each other out. And so a new unit coming in would use the same tactics to try to take Volodar, and Ukraine would just use the same tactics to defend it. They would fall back from... they would basically fall back from the first line of defense and start what is basically a walking ambush. And by the time they got to another line of defense, they would shoot artillery-laid mines. I think they're called RAMs, R-A-A-M. I'm not sure if that's the right acronym or whatever for them. But they would shoot these mines behind the Russian troops. And when they hit the ground, they would activate them. They were anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. They would drop these mines behind the Russians attacking, and then they would stop, turn around. They would start shooting their anti-tank missile systems like the Stugna, their javelins, or their NLAWs, and they would start taking out Russian armor and force the Russians to retreat back through a minefield that wasn't there before. And this would just repeat and repeat and repeat over 8 months. Over 8 months this repeated. And the only time Volodar was ever in danger was the very first set of attacks where they were pushed back to the vicinity of the city itself. And then they were able to counterattack through the woods to the east and west and kind of push them back to the original lines of defense. And now I think they're starting to gain a little bit of ground in that area. So a lot of what's wrong with the Russian military is corruption and incompetence. And that's been a big favor of Ukraine. They're unable to really work together because the way that Putin runs the country is he's a dictator basically. He's a thug, and he lets everybody play off each other to try to get his favor, and nobody below him trusts each other. One of the worst offenders of the whole thing is Sergei Shoigu, right? Guy has no real military experience, and yet he's the Minister of Defense. He's the Minister of the Defense Department in Russia. He is hated by everybody, but because he's such a close confidant of Putin, he's been given this important position and not taken out of it. Shoigu is one of the biggest reasons why Prigozhin started his little whatever his coup attempt was back last month. He's the biggest reason, right? Like he literally said, Shoigu is trying to kill me or kill PMC Wagner. I don't know if it was a false flag or not, but he was like, "Hey, Shoigu dropped artillery on a Wagner camp. We can't stand for this anymore." And the next day, Wagner takes Rostov-on-Don and marches towards Moscow, and then somehow stops. I don't think Russia would have been able to stop the Wagner group from actually taking Moscow. I really don't. So the incompetence on all levels. The fact that it's not a professional army, the officer corps isn't really trained properly. They're corrupt to the core. Ministers take money away. They were supposed to go through, I think, almost $1 trillion modernization of the Russian military. How's that going, guys? How's that going? Crappy is is how it's going. So, while Ukraine is fighting the clock, and while they do have to really try to break through the line somewhere, I think they have enough troops to do it. Whether they'll be able to do it is another question. And if Robotin is actually liberated I think you're gonna see. I think you're gonna see a big. I'm trying to think of the. You're gonna see it. You're gonna see them rolling a little bit faster because getting through the first line of defense is what they really need to do. That's the heaviest defensive lines, the heaviest on everything, and if they can get through that, I think it's going to start rolling downhill quicker and quicker. So, with that, I think I'm going to leave you guys. I think my schedule going forward is going to try to be every Saturday and Sunday. We're going to do podcasts. I'm going to spend the week kind of researching stuff on the podcast and figuring stuff out. So, I'm going to try to mix in some history on here. I think next week we're going to delve into Unit 731 during World War II. Very, very disgusting group of people of the Japanese Empire. Maybe I should maybe I'll make this a World War II type podcast and start some history. I don't know if you guys would like that or not, but history is really something that I love a lot, and it's something that I'd really like to teach other people. So if I can teach somebody certain things and go through some history and research, and love to do it. So I think I'll do some research. Thank you, Sunburst. Really appreciate it. I think I will. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some research on that over the week. I'm going to figure out everything about it, get you some good information. Then we'll do my podcast next Saturday on that group on Unit 731. So I'm going to leave you guys with a little bit of what I'm dealing with here. This right here. This is what I'm dealing with, guys. Right here. This little map here. Look at all that water. We're seeing flooding. We're seeing some flash floodings around here, guys. So I'm going to leave you with thank you guys very much for being here. Really appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your night. Have a great week. I'm going to be calling this the Miller Time Podcast. We are out from episode 2. I will see you guys later. Have a great night.